the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Play! About time. It's 7 o'clock. 10 or 20 couples have already arrived.
Since 1992, Ed Stern has been putting on plays that have delighted, entertained, and challenged Cincinnatians. A year ago, Ed announced that he would retire as the producing artistic director of the Playhouse at the end of this coming season. Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I love live theater. Live theater is a communal experience that leaves lasting personal memories. I remember the first time I saw Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot at the old Edgecliff over 40 years ago. Almost as well as I remember Pavilion, which we just saw a clip of, a wonderful show designed to challenge historians, by the way, that closed the Playhouse season a month ago. The cornerstone of modern theater in Cincinnati is the Playhouse in the Park, largely because of the work of Ed Stern, who has an amazing sense of what will work with Cincinnati audiences on the Playhouse's two-stage. I am joined this morning for the entire program by Ed Stern. Since arriving in Cincinnati in 1992, Ed, working with Executive Director Buzz Ward, has produced 19 consecutive seasons of operating surpluses, built its season ticket base to over 15,000, increased the Playhouse's endowment fivefold, and renovated the facility. More important, in 2004, the Playhouse won a Tony Award as America's Best Regional Theater, and in 2007, a Tony for the revival of Stephen Sondheim's Company. Ed, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Well, you make me feel very tired and old now. Thank you very much, Dan.
Well, it takes a lot of work. And we were just talking ahead of time. And how many vacations have you had in the last 19 years?
3.
Yeah, well, there's your problem.
Some people say it's 3 too many, by the way.
You know, and I've heard you talk about this before, but I've never had you talk about it on Newsmakers. So I want to begin sort of at the beginning. Mm-hmm. How did you get interested in and then ultimately involved in theater?
I grew up in New York, and when I was in high school, my parents, we moved to Manhattan. And my parents loved Broadway musical theater. And for my 10th birthday, they took me to this brand new Broadway musical called My Fair Lady. And I loved it so much, I asked for an additional birthday present, so a month later we saw it again. A Music Man, you name it, all these musicals. And then, by happenstance, I realized there were shows on Broadway that actors did not break into song and dance. This was a revelation to me. And my parents were sweethearts and said, you know what, we're not interested in those. Go on your own. Huh. And so we were living in Manhattan, and so every Friday night, 50 Friday nights a year, I would go see a show, mostly on my own, unless it was a musical. And I fell in love with live theater.
50 nights a year, on your own, beginning at what age?
Well, it probably was when I was a freshman, a sophomore in high school.
Wow.
A sophomore in high school.
So you really did get bit by the bug.
I did, but I didn't think you could actually make a living at it.
Can you?
No, I never learned my lesson. I actually went to University of Virginia undergraduate to major in international relations. Now, in hindsight, I think I would have made the worst diplomat in American history. I think I would have gotten our country into more wars than was ever possible. War with Canada, for example. But I got hooked on theater in my first year in college, and I directed my first play at the end of my freshman year.
Have you acted as well?
I did act in college. I thought I was not very good. My closest friends agreed with my assessment. You know, actors have to be blind. You have to go on stage and give up what you look like. And directors can't really be blind. We have to be able to see the specific details, but also see the whole picture at the same time. So I always talk about directors having a third eye, that eye for detail work and close camera work, but also 2 eyes to pull back and see medium and full range. Actors can't have that full range picture. They need the immediacy. I always looked at myself when I was on stage, and that's why I was a terrible actor. Besides the fact my New York upbringing always gives me away. People figure out I'm not from Northern Kentucky or Cincinnati right away.
Yeah, there's still a little tinge in the voice.
Absolutely.
So directing really from very early on was what you wanted to do with theater, and now for the last 19 years you've been the artistic producing
artistic director.
Okay, big words. What's it mean? What is your responsibility? Because that's not just directing shows. No. What are your responsibilities?
Well, actually, I have to oversee the entirety of the operation. Obviously, production. That is picking directors, the shows I'm not directing, picking designers, casting the shows. Even if the show is guest directed, I'm in New York with the director casting the show. But also responsible for the fiscal health of the theater, which I think is an important part. This year, 38% of American regional theaters had an operating surplus. That's a terrible track record. I mean, there's so many factors into that. Fortunately, we're part of that 38%. So I'm responsible for that. I'm overseeing the administration, the development, the marketing, the public relations. So it's sort of a pyramid structure where, as Buzz Ward, who's a brilliant executive director, who's Harvard MBA, he has all the past, the pedigree that I don't have. I love early on he said, it may be my fault, but it's your responsibility.
Sounds like Buzz.
True.
So when you are casting, you're going to New York. That's where you cast?
Predominantly. Sometimes LA, occasionally Chicago, and obviously occasionally Cincinnati, Ohio. But the majority of American theater actors are located in New York.
Okay.
And so what I realize is that our audiences really don't care where an actor's from. All they care about is that actor good?
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to deliver.
Well, one of the, and this sort of, where they come from or local. We have a little clip here from the piano teacher from this past season, which of course the leading actress was Dale Hodges, who anybody who knows Cincinnati theater knows Dale Hodges in various theaters. She's an amazing actress.
Extraordinary.
And there's somebody who happens to be local. You've cast her in a bunch of things over the years.
And
we can go ahead and see some of that.
And the lovely thing, I didn't even go to New York to cast that role. That role was pre-cast with Dale as Mrs. K, and because I knew she'd be brilliant in it. It's almost as if the play were written for Dale, and that's the joy of having someone as good as Dale Hodges. So, I don't have to sort of apologize to our audiences, well, I had to cast locally. No, I cast the best actor, and the best actor happens to live for that role in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Another person, and I'm hoping to get her on Newsmakers in January, this time a playwright, has had a great career in television writing, but Teresa Rebeck, who is from Cincinnati, and I know her family. You have brought a number of her plays here, but this season, this is a new play that we commissioned, and it has a lot of Cincinnati elements to it. So somebody like Teresa Rebeck, again, a local person but lives in New York, relationship and deciding to commission a play.
Well, the interesting thing is, years ago, Teresa said, and I heard this, and it was sad but true. She said, I get my plays done anywhere in America except my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio. Then we did Bad Dates,
right.
Which was an enormous success. And last season we did The Understudy. And we have this play commission, an endowment, which is wonderful to have. And I decided that endowment and commissioning 2 plays a year should go to women and minority playwrights. That wasn't part of the restrictions, but that was a restriction I gave. And Teresa is one of the people who've gotten the endowment. And now we have a dispute. She believes I asked her to write a play about Cincinnati, Ohio. I believe she's the one who came to me and said, you know, when I asked her for a play commission, she said, well, let me make it about my hometown. However it's really about the values of this town versus the values of New York. It's called Dead Accounts, and it is what I describe as a comedy with pain. It is unbelievably funny, and it is unbelievably painful, and it rides in equal measure at the same time. It's an expert piece of playwriting. And Teresa has her first play on Broadway this fall with Alan Rickman. She has a mid-season replacement, another network, NBC, called Smash, which is their big mid-season replacement. It's meant to be their Glee. And I'm told it's quite wonderful. And now we're doing this. Now, I have to admit, this plays she came in a little late with the commission, a few years late, but you know what? It was well worth it.
I knew she'd been working on it because there was, in the back of Oprah's magazine at one point, they just had a photo of what's on your bedside table, and it was Teresa Rebeck's bedside table. And my book on Cincinnati, the Queen City, was sitting there.
Is that right?
Believe me, I never see that magazine. But all of a sudden, I started getting all kinds of calls. So I knew she was working on this. And I know her mother has said, since this deals with family relationships, they're a little concerned about that too.
Yeah.
So working with people
True.
like Dale Hodges and Teresa Rebeck is a real opportunity. The other thing you just mentioned about really putting some energy behind minority playwrights or actors or whatever, you've really tried to expand, as I see it, you've tried to address issues and themes that would be interesting to a lot of people. This past season, again, we have a little clip from Gee's Bend, reaching out to the African American community, reaching out to other communities. It seems like that's really been a conscious effort of yours.
You know, one of the pleasures, years ago we did a play called Blues for an Alabama Sky, which was about a family that owned a mortuary, a black family in South Carolina. And one of my favorite quotes was a gentleman leaving the show and coming up to me and said, who knew an African American family in South Carolina was that Jewish? And for me, the pleasure was early on. I think some people thought if it was an African American play, it had no, and you were Caucasian, it had no value.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not what theater's about. Theater's not about creating walls and barriers between races. It's about breaking that down. And over the years, I think things have changed. My first show at the Playhouse was Master Harold and the Boys, Arthur Fugard's play about apartheid in South Africa. This was 1992, and I remember some people coming out and saying, well, why are you starting with a play about race relations? It has no bearing on us. I thought, well, I'm not sure that's necessarily true.
I don't think anybody would say that
and now I think people recognize, if it's a good play, it's a good play. And regardless, and the pleasure for me is seeing many Caucasians at a black play,
right,
and many blacks at a white play.
Increasingly the case over the years, I think, because you've tried to bring in plays with a lot of different backgrounds, and people get used and say theater itself is the value.
Theater is theater.
Right. We got to take a break, but stay right there. Stay tuned. After the break, the Playhouse's 2 Tony Awards over the years. That'll be back.
The nice thing is on the West End in London right now, there's a production of Coyote on a Fence. And if you get the playbill of that production, it says originally premiered at Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park. So what's important for me is it's not just applauding the Playhouse. Cincinnati, Ohio is being recognized as a forefront of American drama.
Welcome back. That was Ed Stern on Newsmakers in 2004 talking about the Tony Award that the Playhouse in the Park won that year as Best Regional Theater in the country. 3 years later, the Playhouse won a second Tony for the amazing 2006 revival of Stephen Sondheim's Company. The creative character of the staging carried the play to Broadway for 280 performances. Here is a report that former Local 12 reporter Dennison Keller prepared in 2006 as Company was about to open at the Playhouse.
The character Bobby is the guest of honor in Company, but with this ensemble, he could just as well be named Tony. The cast is led by former Tony Award nominees Raul Esparza and Barbara Walsh, and directed by John Doyle, who is expected to receive a Tony nod this year for his Broadway smash revival of Sweeney Todd.
Yeah, in Cincinnati, you could say it's lucky. I'm the lucky one, really. You know, I'm getting to do a Stephen Sondheim musical under very nice conditions with very nice people, some of whom have got great track records, all of whom are highly talented.
That is evident as soon as the cast takes the stage. Not only do they sing, act, and dance, they are their own orchestra. The entire score is performed by the actors on stage. Esparza, who anchors the show as Bobby, must also play cymbals and piano.
I don't know how to play the piano. I've never played with an orchestra. And my hands shake and sweat starts pouring down them and my face starts to sort of go, and I'm sure I'll get over the terror, but it's the worst case of stage fright I've had since I was a little kid.
But you have some, you darling, go ahead.
Returning to the state where she grew up as a child is Kristen Huffman.
Well, first of all, I feel like I won the lottery.
The former Miss Ohio plays flute, piccolo, and sax.
Sax is really sexy, and it's very cool. So, not the way I play it.
But there is little time for jokes on the opening day of rehearsal.
So you're playing, looking on the floor, and you're moving away. You can read it from maybe 5 feet, and then you're lost. Then he stops and he does something else, and you run over, get your music, put it on the floor. The next day, we were off book.
The multitasking is more than a gimmick. It is incorporated into the humor and text of the show. Walsh plays the role of Joanne and the chimes.
You know, she is a character who is very sort of, her pitch is like low, and it's sharp and it's severe, juxtaposed against this little dainty triangle with a very ding, which has a high note. So that's funny.
And if this show closes on a high note, there is a shot it could be headed to Broadway. And how many more Tony nominations might follow then?
It's a lucky thrill, really. This is cutting-edge work, and to have that happening in Cincinnati as opposed to London or New York, where you expect it to happen, is not just an honor for the city, but also a testament to how much the Playhouse believes in what the city can handle in terms of art.
Welcome back. Ed, sitting in the audience that night when I saw that play, and I am the opposite of your parents. I'm not a big musical fan. I'd much rather. You just knew instantly as an audience member there was something special about that production. I mean, it just was unbelievable. Was there something really magic about that?
Well, I'm a huge Stephen Sondheim fanatic.
Yes, and in fact, Stephen Sondheim keeps reappearing in your...
Number 9 this year, the 9th.
The 9th, yes.
And I just think he's an American genius. Forget theater genius, composing genius, he's a genius. And to have him and John Doyle put together for Cincinnati, Ohio was a perfect marriage for that show. And I love the fact that it's coming, not that Company's coming back, but that marriage of Sondheim and Doyle is coming back this season with Merrily We Roll Along. And everyone, when I announced Merrily, everyone I knew in New York who was familiar with musicals, and particularly Sondheim, said that is the show that is so most worthy of a significant revival. And it's getting it in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Great. Again, I mean, and that's it. These two Tonys have put that theater, your theater, and Cincinnati theater on this national stage, international stage, and it's really wonderful.
One of my pleasures when it was announced that we're winning the Regional Theater Tony Award in 4 was that people, when I'd go to grocery shopping, whatever, people would stop me, and rather than say, well, my God, this is unbelievable, what they would say is, why did it take New York this long to figure it out?
Yeah.
And that was the pleasure. They knew they had something important here in Cincinnati. It was just that the rest of the world was catching up.
You know, it's not just the Playhouse either. I mean, my wife and I, we have season tickets also at the Ensemble and at Shakespeare. get to the know when we can, the know theater when we can. We have great theater here, and the important point is, talk to Lynn Meyer, talk to anybody in those theaters, and what they said is Ed Stern is the person who's behind the scenes encouraging this and helping us make all of this happen.
We're not competitive.
Yeah, that's not your attitude at all.
And also I think ArtsWave helps in that, in terms of spurring on people collaborating and talking amongst themselves as opposed to competing. And my attitude is, someone goes out to the Symphony, to the May Festival, goes out to the Taft or the Art Museum. If they go out and recognize they can have a good time outside, they'll eventually come to the Playhouse. Actually, I've always said, sorry about this, my competitor's television. The idea of staying home, I can say this on Sunday morning because we're not performing. But the rest of the time,
it's true.
I go, that attitude of staying home and enjoying yourself, for me, that's slightly, I'm aghast at that.
Well, and that's why I started the way I did. There's this communal character to live theater. It's the same thing with the difference between renting a DVD or going to the movie theater. I'd much rather go to the Esquire and be in the theater with people, and even if you don't talk to anybody right then, there's a communal element to that. This season, which will be your last season in your role here at the Playhouse, you're going to direct the first 2 plays.
Insanity.
Yeah,
yes.
I was going to say.
Yes.
You'll have one on each stage.
One on each stage. The opening show in the Marks will be God of Carnage, Yasmina Reyes' really wonderful drama, comedy, drama, however you want to reference it. A huge hit in London, huge hit on Broadway, being done in regional theaters around the country, about parents misbehaving very badly. And on the Shelter House, my final show will be As You Like It, Shakespeare.
When you were thinking about setting this season up, did you purposely choose those 2 for yourself?
I did. I want to end with Shakespeare. He has a good track record.
Yeah.
But also
probably a future too.
Yeah, probably a future. But it's also a play celebrating life and love. And sometimes people just say it's a romantic comedy, and they sort of throw it away in the wash with that. But it is, you leave the theater in a good production of As You Like It feeling very special. And the connective tissue, when you do a comedy like Twelfth Night, as I did years ago at the Playhouse, and you get a laugh, and that laugh isn't based on doing something stupid or silly and having an actor fall on a banana peel, but because the line is funny, and that line's 400 years old. That's really quite spectacular, and says we haven't grown up, we haven't changed, but it does say something about Shakespeare.
You were saying that As You Like It, it's about life and love. I think many people in our community know that after you announced that you were going to retire from your role at the Playhouse, that you discovered only later that you also are fighting cancer at this moment. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Pancreatic cancer. So I have I consider the Rolls Royce of cancer. But I have wonderful doctors, and so I feel like I'm doing well. Actually, Teresa Rebeck gave me my mantra. This is true. Those times when if I'm not feeling 100%, my mantra is Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. She's been fighting pancreatic cancer for years and winning the battle. And so I go, if I can emulate Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that would be a very good time.
Because when you announced that you wanted to retire, you announced it 2 seasons ahead, so you gave the Playhouse plenty of time. Your idea wasn't to retire, but to do the things you wanted to do, which is continuing to direct.
Continuing to direct and actually do some teaching. I miss teaching. I miss the energy young people bring to a classroom or to a show. What I won't necessarily miss are all the meetings. The 8 o'clock meetings, 9 o'clock meetings, necessary in the role of producing artistic director, completely unnecessary for a stage director.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is this community, if you start directing other places, and we will miss your energy, but I hope you stay here. I hope you continue to provide that kind of energy not only for the Playhouse, but for all of the other theaters in our region, and for the people who love theater. And it's just been a great 19 years so far of being a season ticket holder at the Playhouse and loving not every play.
Yeah. Well, that would be impossible.
But I really appreciate everything you do in the theater world, but also everything you've done for Cincinnati and how you've opened our eyes to so many things over the years.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that.
I appreciate that.
And look forward to having you back on.
That's a deal.
As we move forward. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the men and the women shaping our community for the future. Have a good week.